Well, as we continue with the broadcast this morning, right here on Assalam Media, now for a very long time, the activist community, particularly with regards to Palestine, has been calling for a lot. And just today, we know that there was due to be protest action at the UAE embassy, and we learned, as we did last week, 2 weeks in a row, permission for the protest was not granted for whatever reason. And this is what activists are now starting to question South Africa and where do we stand as far as Palestine is concerned, because there is this demand for greater transparency in more ways than one. The protest at the UAE embassy is just one example. The whole Glencore issue demanding transparency from our government as well, which has taken the matter to the ICJ as far as Israel is concerned, but that is still remains a huge bone of contention. And once again, in terms of trade, in terms of the relationship that South Africa has with Israel at this point in time, we don't know what state institutions are doing. And this is what we're talking about, because during the week we've seen the boat campaign that went, and this ship was suspected of having carrying arms to Israel, and we've subsequently learned of the Ultramarine being cleared of any of the arms charges. But once again, the call for greater transparency, and we need to hold these institutions accountable. We need to hold our officials and our governments also accountable in more ways than one. And this is the reason why we joined by MP and Secretary General at United for Palestine, Imraan Subrathie. Haji Imraan, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and welcome.
Walaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, Haji Naid Wadi, and to yourself and your viewers. And Jazakallah, thank you for having me on your show.
Yes, Jazakallah, Jummah Mubarak to you as well. And we trust you're going to have a wonderful Jummah, inshallah. But again, as in my introduction, a number of points that I alluded to, and I think this whole question about transparency on what is happening, what is taking place in South Africa, and particularly when it impacts Palestine, when it impacts the cause for Palestine as well. And just looking at it from your perspective, as an activist and also as a member of parliament, in terms of the relevance and the concerns that are shared by many activists around the country.
I think, Haji Naid, the role of activists must never ever be downplayed, and it must never be underestimated. Often, government does not respond, as they would respond until and unless often, activists make a noise as they are making and as they are speaking up. So I think as an activist, the role that activists play and must continue to play in advocating for human rights, in advocating for the issues that you're talking about around government implementing the various trade, etc., limitations in terms of supporting Zionists and the apartheid state must be active. So I think first and foremost, I want to start by saying let's keep up the activism. That must continue. We must write to government. We must engage with government. Let me then also respond to maybe what took place in Durban, and that was the Ultramarine boat. And my experiences when I have engaged with various entities of the government. Now, during my intervention as an MP to try to really establish the facts, because it was an allegation, I cut across various departments, various ministries. I managed to cut across from transport, because that's where it sat at the Durban port. I cut across to DIRCO, the international relations, and I cut across to defense and military, because it was an issue also of possible state security. And finally, it cut across to police, because it was finally sitting with harbor police and border police. So throughout my journey across the board, like for example at DIRCO, there was an overwhelming clarity of purpose that we as a country will not be a party to any such allowing, for example, in that context, a ship that is carrying an alleged weapons or dangerous machinery intended, or dangerous equipment intended for the genocide, to facilitate the genocide. We will not allow it. And we had the full support of the departments, to this extent that on Wednesday, For example, border police actually did six nautical miles when the ship was away. They went onto the ship, unknown to the ship, and they did a search and a seizure on the ship to search that are these allegations true. So I think the flip side of the coin is it is not true that government is not responsive. I think when it is brought to the attention of government, government has demonstrated its consistency, and this is through my lived experience. Like, for example, when I spoke to Durko Haji Inayat Wadi with regards to the concern regarding the port of Durban being used as a thoroughfare for docking of ships carrying such alleged weapons or alleged machinery, Durko was very, very clear. In fact, they shared with me the Hague report, which we've seen, but they shared it again. They said, no, the very first item there is the issue surrounding weapons, is the issue surrounding ammunition, arms, etc., and our ports being used at Trufe. And Durko was very, very clear that we will not allow it. If that is the case, then we will act. So the point I'm making is when activists escalate these concerns, I have found at a government level, government is taking it seriously, and therefore we must keep up the activism and we must continue to escalate issues that you've raised, such as the supply of coal. This is a valid concern. This must be raised, this must be escalated, and it must be brought to the attention of government. And then government, certainly in my lived experiences, they have responded in a manner that I am quite comfortable with, especially in terms of what had happened in Durban this week. Yeah.
Well, certainly. In fact, we do appreciate obviously you providing clarity because I know this was a major talking point as far as the ultramarine is concerned, and there were huge concerns. And now that we have got clarity that it has been cleared of the armed charges, obviously we can breathe a lot more freely. But again, just coming back to what we have been talking about, and early on, I spoke to somebody out of Lebanon, and again, the very same concerns with regards to many of these governments who are now wanting to recognize Palestine as a state, whether we're talking of the UK, we're talking of Canada, we're talking of France as well. But again, the criticism and the major concern, I would say, Haji Imran, is the it's business as usual with the Zionist entity. And I think it's about activists that are losing patience because they're not seeing any concrete measures being taken. They're not seeing any steps being taken because, like you mentioned, we cited the example of the Glencore coal issue. Now, this has been on the government's table for a very, very long time. Another example we can cite is South Africans serving in the IOF as well. That has been sitting for well over 13 years. And activism, as you mentioned, is good, but activists can only do so much and can only go so far. Now, these are matters that have been lying for months on end or years on end on the tables of government. And this is where we're saying, and rightly so, you speak of transparency, and this is where we require government to be open, to be transparent in terms of where these matters are, what they're going to do about it, what actions are going to be taken, and where they stand on these matters.
Yeah. Let me respond to that, Haji Inayat Wadi, by saying that the most recent agreement that was signed in Bologna in Colombia, the Hague group where they met, where 12 nations agreed on 6 points. They committed themselves to 6 points. I think that is a very groundbreaking and that's very current. And that is a response to act in urgency. So I think that we need to place that at the front of our discussions going forward. And I acknowledge your points that have been made about what appears to be government not being responsive enough or not responding sooner than it should. But let us focus on how we're going to respond going forward, because what we have got before us is a few things. One, as I said, we've got the Hague Group, which has 6 critical points where we committed as ourselves to indicate. And as I said, when I took it to the attention of Durko, immediately I was told, yes, we cannot allow it because we have committed to this report. In fact, when I read the report, it was item number 1. So we have that report. We also have the state president president very, very passionately defending the position of Palestine when he responded to his budget vote debate on presidency. I think it would have been last week, Thursday, no, the week before that. Very clearly, after articulating the challenges we suffer as a country because of the Americans imposed export tariff increases and the withdrawal of AIDS funding, President Cyril Ramaphosa again reaffirmed our continued support with the people of Palestine. And in fact, he called out world leaders that remain silent. So what I am saying is, we have at the moment a fresh mandate before us. And this is why we need to use that fresh mandate to hold government responsible. Now, myself, as a member of parliament and belonging to the party that had initiated the ICJ in the sixth administration, certainly these issues that you have raised in this show here, as well as from other activists have come to me, certainly now in the context, again, of the Hague report and the fact that we are signatories to that, I believe it presents with us a fresh opportunity to say that in terms of this commitment we have made, now we need to walk the talk, we need to hold ourselves accountable as South Africans. And all those issues that you have raised needs to be put and sent through to government. Inshallah, as United for Palestine, I know we have we've done an open letter to the president, but I will certainly, my intention is as a member of parliament to raise this within my political party as well, and directly with the relevant ministries, and write to them and raise these concerns that have been emanating through solidarity. And as I said, whenever I've raised these concerns, I've always been met with a very, very positive and affirmative responses that have been very comfortable. So I'm inshallah, my commitment is to really amplify these concerns, as well as I would encourage activists to write again in the context of the Hague report. If they haven't seen it, please get a copy of the Hague report, because that is what we as South Africans have committed ourselves henceforth to be held accountable to, and to commit ourselves to do.
Well, Jazakallah for that. I'm just looking at a comment that has come through from one of our viewers. And I'd like, before we just terminate this discussion, I think it's important because this is the sentiment that is expressed on the ground. And what Abdul Razak Ismailov is saying is next up, start forcing the ban on coal and diamond exports to Israel. From what I hear, load shedding is back while our coal is powering Tel Aviv's energy grid. Get your unions on the ground, COSATU, SATAU, NUMSA, SACP, EFF, etc., to also forcibly halt coal exports to that satanic entity. Now, that's what I'm saying, and this is exactly what we've been talking about, Haji Imran, that there is the sense of impatience that is and that is the feeling that we are getting on the ground, and as media as well, talking to many organizations, talking to many activists, again, that patience seem to be running out. And I think this is absolutely critical, and this is what government needs to realize, that these matters have been brought to our table. What are we doing about it?
Let me respond to that very briefly. Firstly, you may know that in Monday, we hosted a very senior delegation of the Palestinian government here in Durban. United for Palestine, as well as the ANC in KZN, hosted them. And the reason I'm saying that is, when this issue around the boat did occur in KZN, both the African National Congress as well as trade unions, COSATU, were ready to hold, to march and to mobilize. So we had forces ready to mobilize, because certainly this would not have been allowed by the politically, as well as by the workers of COSATU. So what I can say to you is that the point has been noted. We have got a renewed sense of commitment by COSATU, and again, these are the type of pressure that we need to put onto government. And again, I am saying that all these issues are valid issues, and there is now a fresh mandate in terms of the Hague report, that we must now, in terms of that, hold ourselves and hold the government accountable. And as I indicated, Haji Naid Wadi, on myself as an MP, inshallah, I commit myself to take this matter forward within my political party and as well within the executives of the government to see how we can. And rightly so, I agree. There is been impatient as an activist. When I wear my activist hat, we are equally frustrated that, how on one end we have been the only country that has been bold and courageous to go to ICJ, and yet we have got all these other areas in which there is this bilateral relationship taking place, and how do we deal with that? But certainly it's now is the time to amplify and raise this concern, especially in the context of where we know the conflict is going in Gaza, particularly where the talk now of a single state is taking place, annexation of parts of Gaza is taking place. Now more than ever before, we need to be far more decisive and firm in how we respond to it. So I fully endorse and support the sentiments of activists, and inshallah I commit myself to work even harder to ensure that these things are addressed.
Well, Jazakallah khairan so much for that, Haji Imran, and also for your time. Have yourself, again, a wonderful Jummah, inshallah, and obviously looking forward to future engagements. But for now, all the best to you. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Uh, Imraan Subrathie, MP and Secretary General at the United for Palestine. And just to add to a further comment by Abdul Razak Ismailov on the topic that we have been talking about, saying that there should be a crackdown on entities that provide material support to the IDF, instead of just hoping that any IDF soldier returns to South Africa to face justice. Bye. So SAZF, the South African Zionist Federation, SAFI, South African Friends for Israel, and SAJBD, the South African Jewish Board for Deputies. And that's all we have time for in this hour. We still got the next hour coming up, which is brought to you by Africa Muslims Agency. We've still got Fired Up with Hafiz Imran Chunara, and also looking at economy with a discussion with an economist, Rizwana Sumud, talking about the South African Reserve Bank, the rate cut. Will this be the last line of defense against the U.S. tariffs? And we know what Donald Trump has done, and new tariffs that have been now signed by Donald Trump. We're also looking at a mother's cry across borders, Mothers for Gaza, pleading for the lives of Gaza's starving children. And also yesterday, 31st of July, very, very relevant. 1 year since the assassination and the martyrdom of Sheikh Ismail Haniya, rahimahumullah.